Hello class, Professor Quigley here again, and I'm going to help you get through Chapter 9.10. And in this one, we're going to create a user-defined function where we do like we did in the last problem, where we're going to parse over an array of values. Although this time, rather than saying whether they're all even or they're all odd, this activity is going to have us kind of take out the values that don't meet a certain threshold. And then we'll only output the numbers that are equal to or above that threshold. So let's go ahead and start this and get this problem done and over with. So I'm going to go ahead and backspace here. Oops. Don't hit F12, otherwise that'll happen. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is declare our function here. So let's go ahead and read this function. It's actually given to us. So we're going to write function. We're going to call it output ints less than or equal to threshold. And it's going to accept an array of integers. We're going to call that inside of this function user vals. Then it's also going to accept a second variable in which it is the upper threshold, and that's going to be an integer as well, and it's going to return nothing. So the fact that it returns nothing tells me that it's probably also going to do all of our output for us. But as always, make sure you read the pseudocode here and follow along should you have any questions, because that is exactly what I am going to do. But I'm going to copy and paste this. That way I can eliminate any chance of typos. And then I'm going to do 3 spaces, because if I don't do 3 spaces, you will get an error. So I'm going to declare integer I, and then I'm going to do my for loop. So for I, we're going to start it off equaling 0. Then we're going to do as long as I is less than user vals.size. And then we'll do our counter, I equals I plus 1. We'll go over 3 spaces here. So inside, or basically for each one of those items in the array, we want to do a check. We're going to say if user val, which item in the array? This one from this particular iteration. If it's less than or equal to the upper threshold, and remember that's a variable here that is declared up here, integer upper threshold. So that's why we don't have to declare, because it's declared in our function statement up at the top. So if this item in the array is less than or equal to the upper threshold, we're going to put user vals to output. So essentially, remember, this application, what it's doing is it's taking an array of value, and it's only going to output, actually, it's only going to output all the numbers that are less than that upper threshold number. We're going to put a space here, because this is a loop, and so every time it outputs that number, we want it to also put a space with it. So that is it for that function. Basically accepts an array of values, also accept the upper threshold, and then loop over, and then we have an if statement where it just checks to say, hey, is this one less than or equal to threshold? If so, output it. Basic stuff. So now we're going to do function main, returns nothing, and we're going to declare an integer. So if you remember, we get a little confused up here is because it says we have to get 6 integers from the user. But it also tells us that the last one passed in is going to be the threshold amount. So don't get confused thinking right off the top you have to declare an integer array that holds 6. We actually wanted to declare one that only holds 5. And then what we'll do is we'll just do the old-fashioned way and get that 6 value from the user. So we'll call that user vals. We'll declare upper threshold, because we know that in order to call this function up here, we need both of these variables, so let's declare them inside this function so we can use them. We also need our integer that we use as a counter as we iterate over that for loop. So I'm lazy. I'm going to copy and paste line 3, because I need to do the same thing down here on, we'll do it on line 13. Now, we'll do user vals. We'll do each specific item of this iteration is going to equal get next input. Now, this is where I was saying on the sixth one, even though we filled up all 5, let's just do it the old-fashioned way where we say upper threshold equals get next input. Then all we have to do now is just call the function. So we already have it. Rather than risk typing it all out and making a typo, I'm just going to copy it on line 18, going to paste it, and then in parentheses I have to pass in the values that it needs. So I can tell by looking up here that the first thing it's going to need is the array, and then it's also going to need the threshold. So remember, you only declare the data type in the parentheses when you're creating the function. When you're using the function and you're calling the function, you just pass in the variable that it needs. So I'm going to do user vals, comma, and then also the order in which you put them in. So up here, if it says, hey, the first thing I need is the array, and the second thing I need is the threshold, make sure the first thing you pass in is the array, and the second thing you pass in is the threshold. And I believe that's it. So in this main function, we don't have to actually output anything because we're outputting it in the function. So let's go ahead and check our work here. So I can see expected output format, string to variable to output. So again, our troubleshooting skills should be a little better towards the end of the class because we should have seen error messages like this before. And so I could just tell, I put in quotes, I didn't finish it and write in to output. So I'm going to click next. I'm going to come over here and write to output. Check that out. Now I have another error. Unknown word, user threshold. Maybe you meant upper threshold. So again, whatever you declare a variable, how you declare it is how you have to use it later on. So this is why sometimes you'll notice I'll just double click that, hold control and hit C to copy, double click it, and then hit paste. That helps me out. Boom. And that is it. We are done. So if you have any questions about that problem, wants to know why the code has to be written a certain way, or if you want any particular follow-up with that, make sure you message me in the discussion threads. But until then, I look forward to seeing you on the next problem, which is the last problem. Take care.